Advisory boards to manage wildlife workshop session informational. Okay, we'll start with the welcome comments by Chairman and Secretary Laws. We'll start Secretary Laws.
Sure. So it's been, my recollection, some time since we've had a true county advisory board workshop where things are considerably less formal and we have the opportunity to engage in back and forth manner. In speaking with former Chairman Drew, we saw this as an opportunity to, given the amount of turnover, saw it as an opportunity to help the county advisory board, certainly the new membership, become aware of some of the processes and have that opportunity for engagement in those non-legislative years. So we'd like to really kind of return to more of a true workshop type venue, take items from the cabs throughout the years in between the workshop, build that agenda to where it provides value to the cabs in those areas that they're desiring to have that opportunity.
On the side, black button on the side, torching.
So what I'd like to do, just as far as initial comments or remarks, is I would like to offer my appreciation for each of you who give your time away from your families, time away from your job, time away from your home to be part of this public process, and certainly appreciate your dedication to the wildlife resources of Nevada and to this process. And so as we proceed, I just have a kind of a PowerPoint. What I'd like to do today is kind of provide an agency overview. And interesting thing, as I was putting this together, I was thinking about opportunity for new CAB members, but then I look at who's here. I think Tom Castanelli's been on the CAB since I was 3 or 4. Just kidding. And so I don't know how much value there will be to you guys, but again, this is an informational, it's a workshop, and I don't think we should limit our topics of discussion strictly to the PowerPoint, and certainly we can take note of other items that you guys would like to have the opportunity to engage on going forward. And so before I start the PowerPoint, I'd like to see if the chairman has any further comments.
I don't have a whole lot, but I do appreciate the CAB process, and I appreciate that you all continue to come, and it's important to help us as a commission provide your input from your counties and your public, and that helps us do our job better. And if there's anything we can do as a commission to make it easier for the CABs process, certainly bring it forward.
So the way that this is kind of agendized, we have an agenda item that's an agency overview. And so I'd like to kind of walk you through the agency overview. And then the next item on the agenda is more specific to the CAB roles, responsibilities, regulations process. And so we'll do this overview. Certainly it's informal. As I go through this, I'll go relatively slow and casual, and if you guys have questions, feel free to ask them as we go through, and then we'll see where we are time-wise, and what the chairman's desire is. The next agenda item, we'll have some assistance from Gil to talk about specific CAB roles and responsibilities, and at that time I'll also kind of walk through some of the regulations process. There was a desire, we talk about regulation, we have these regulations, we bring them back, and we have issues with video conferencing, with open meeting laws, and it's a much more cumbersome process than I think most people realize. And so, again, former Chairman Drew and I discussed discussed the value in trying to facilitate a broader awareness or understanding of what that regulations process looks like. So with that, I'm going to start the agency overview. So the NDOW mission statement, to protect, preserve, manage, and restore wildlife and its habitat for its aesthetic, scientific, educational, recreational, and economic benefit to citizens of Nevada and the United States, and to promote the safety of persons using vessels on the waters of this state. Majority of which is contained in NRS chapters 501 through 506. On the wildlife side of things, 488 on boating. There's a few other minor things outside of those chapters, but I think it's safe to say about 99% of what's contained in that mission statement is covered in those chapters. So if you look at Nevada's wildlife resources, try to quantify it, try to put some numbers to it. We're talking about 892, give or take, different species regularly occurring in Nevada. The majority of which are bird species, 456 species of birds, 173 species of fish, 161 species of mammals, 78 species of reptiles, and 24 amphibian species. The ESA listing activities, and these numbers have changed just a little bit. At the time this slide was put together, sage grouse was a candidate species. It's no longer a candidate species. However, I'm sure we've had at least one, if not two, take its place on the list of candidates. So approximately 3 species as candidates, and the candidate means that they're in that review process where we're constantly engaged with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. 10 species listed as threatened and 22 as endangered. Any questions on that? And I'm going to ask continually for questions, so just to give you guys the opportunity to engage and try to make this a little less formal. But any questions on the big picture?
So Tony, how many of that, you may have said it in my mind there, of that 892, what do we currently have?
Well, ostensibly, we manage all of them.
Where do we put our dollars per year?
Well, I mean, I think you probably know the answer to that question. I mean, we rely on a disproportionately small number of our citizens and a disproportionately small number of our species to generate the revenue to take care of the balance of the species for the balance of the citizens, because that's our statutory responsibility. I have thrown out, on my list of to-dos has been determine actually how many species of fish, bird, and mammal, well, I guess and reptiles for that matter, that generate revenue. That, oftentimes people try to take an economic model and they try to apply an economic model to wildlife management and say, well, this species doesn't pay for itself, or that species doesn't pay for itself. And there's nothing in our statutory or enabling statutes to say only manage those things that pay for themselves. If that were the case, we wouldn't have anybody really taking care of the peregrine falcon or the pika or I guess the pygmy rabbits are game species. But there's a lot of species out there that don't necessarily have a direct revenue stream tied to their existence. However, we still have that statutory responsibility. Any other questions on this? So we look at the approximate funding by source, wildlife fees and grants, roughly 85%. And that includes the federal grants, that's tag and license fees, and then the federal grants that those tag and license fees enable us to qualify for in certifying hunters, licensees in the field, anglers and hunters. Boat fees and grants, another 11%. The other state funds like Q1, for example, and then state general fund. And the state general fund was, prior to this past session, was around 1%. This past session, we requested some funding to help with some of the urban wildlife challenges. We felt that the urban wildlife challenges were truly a state issue, that it wasn't necessarily an issue that was fair to continue to subsidize our increased efforts with that sportsman revenue to subsidize a community, for example, that was unwilling to deal with trash in an appropriate manner. And the state legislature, first initially the governor supported that and put that forward in the governor's recommended budget, and we received a little bump in general fund to address urban wildlife issues from the
Before
legislature.
you leave that, are both grants and fees the same federal match as the wildlife fees and grants?
That's a little bit more nebulous to me than on the wildlife side, but it's U.S. Coast Guard grants based on registered vessels. It isn't calculated the same way, and we do have some challenges there because we're seeing a decrease in registered vessels. Part of it is due, we believe, is due to drought and receding water levels, where part of it is due to a shift to paddlecraft, where you're seeing more people recreating in the water on paddleboards and kayaks and those kinds of things. So there are some challenges there. We've talked about, we're tasked with, so the issue with paddlecrafts is a little analogous to the issue we have with some of the non-game species. So we still have the responsibility to keep the boaters safe. So people in a kayak, people on a paddleboard, if they don't have a life jacket, we have the law enforcement responsibility to enforce. We do the investigations on those unfortunate situations. If there's a drowning, we do the investigations. We cite. However, those individuals with those paddlecrafts aren't paying into the system like motorized vessels or others. So there is, as we see that shift and we see a decrease in registered vessels, that does create some challenges, and we've talked about ways of maybe trying to offset some of those losses when looking at paddlecrafts paying into the system. We haven't come up with any solutions, but it's not. This is another kind of problem that is a benefit to have something like a WACWA to have these discussions, because the shift that we're seeing in paddlecraft isn't unique to Nevada. And looking at maybe how other states are moving to recoup some of those revenues, and then also how U.S. Coast Guard or U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service views those ideas.
Tony, do you have any kind of idea, like the other state funds that are listed there, what kind of revenues are being brought in through OHV registrations that you guys aren't getting, is DMV getting?
The idea that I have from the DMV on OHV is that it's still in the red, that it's not an asset, it's a liability. And I don't know the specifics as to, if it's efficiencies of how the program's run, if it's enforcement and having more people register. But the DMV is, at least their former director, expressed frustrations with that program and the lack of revenue, and it failed to meet projections and was in the red. I believe it still is, but I don't know. So when we look at the department structure, we have 253 full-time employees. Additionally, approximately 40 seasonals and 25 contractors, taking us seasonally at any given time maybe just over 300, but 253 FTEs, full-time employees, 120 buildings as we look around the state, 32 radio towers, and the radio towers are located in some pretty remote terrain, so that isn't an insignificant number when we start talking about being able to get to them, and then their importance from a law enforcement communication and safety standpoint.
So Tony, on those towers, we don't share that with any of the cell carriers for cost and maintenance?
No, there's some efforts occurring right now. DPS is looking at modernizing their system. Clearly our needs are a lot different. DPS, Highway Patrol builds a system that helps them communicate along all the roadways. Their coverage area is a little bit different than our coverage area. I don't even pretend to understand all the nuance and technology with radios and megahertz. However, we're having some discussions with DPS to see if there's some opportunities to kind of pool resources. These discussions have been occurring. When I was first hired with the agency in the capacity of the GIS, I was developing maps of coverage and trying to figure out where NDF, sheriff's offices, highway patrol, and trying to have one system. However, different agencies have different requirements, different communication requirements, and different areas of coverage. It's an ongoing
I was
conversation.
thinking less about, you talking about other agencies, but, you know, cell phone companies love to have coverage in areas and in rural areas. You guys have a lot of towers, and we're maintaining it with increased cell coverage in certain areas because we don't have it.
Yeah, clearly I can learn a whole lot more about the agreements that we have with land management agencies for the placement of those. They're typically co-located with other facilities, microwave towers, but it's not an area that I have a complete understanding of opportunities. But I can tell you that we're presently talking with Department of Public Safety, who's revamping their entire system to the tune of millions of dollars, including radios, towers, and looking if there's an opportunity for us to have as good or better coverage and ride in on their coattails. But those are early in discussion, and Chief Warden Turnipseed has been talking with his radio folks, and we'll continue to look for those opportunities. 11 wildlife management areas encompassing approximately 120,000 acres. 8 major facilities. We say major facilities. This office is a major facility. Valley Road, Winnemucca, Elko, Ely, Vegas. Spread across 7 unique divisions. Across the top of the screen, we have 4 fish hatcheries. Mason Valley, Gallagher, Spring Creek Rearing Station, Lake Mead, and then 3 divisions as depicted in the 3 colors, blue and tan. So what I'd kind of like to do is go through each division and just speak to some of their number of personnel, and then maybe some of the key functions in each of those divisions. Any questions on the structure? So,
I have a question,
yeah.
sorry. And it goes back to the wildlife species, just in general, with the endangered and threatened. Are the majority certain types you had them, like for instance, are they aquatic species, or are they, I mean, can you say from that one?
So like the 22 endangered?
Right.
Yeah, I believe it would be safe to say, and I would ask our fisheries division administrator, if, off the top of your head, the 22 endangered, my guess is that 80% of those are.
Of that total, 24 of the listed species in the state either threatened or endangered or aquatic. And they believe that one of those candidate species is an amphibian or a leopard frog. The list goes down by 1 because when this was made, Columbia spotted frog was a candidate species that's been removed from the list because of a not warranted decision.
And that was what we talked about, was it September in Las Vegas,
Yes.
when the Fish and Wildlife Service came, and we had that conservation agreement was key in removing that species from the candidate list. So director's office and accompanied administration. So this says 20 positions, and I go, holy cow, 20? Do we really have 20 positions in the director's office? I had no idea. But this includes fiscal, HR, there's a lot of associated positions. So it's clearly agency administration, the commission, we provide the support for you all, county advisory boards, likewise. Fiscal services, key aspects in fiscal services, budget development, tracking, human resources. The Human Resources Division is directly under the supervision of the Director's Office, confidentiality issues, et cetera. And then all the centralized costs. Those centralized costs are just, operating expenses, all those things that we pay for around the state that are centralized under the Director's Office. Presently, of course, 1 director, 2 deputy directors, administrative assistant, Suzanne, and we have a regulations position under the director's office. Formerly Jordan Neubauer, some of you have had a chance to meet Jordan. She moved into fiscal services, and her replacement will start Monday. We have 2 people in human resources, and then a handful in fiscal services. Any questions on that structure, function? Operations division, 34 positions in operations division. Each of these divisions has a division administrator, and then depending on the functions in the division, personnel is proportionate to those needs. Licensing is a huge issue. Business services, all the customer service, customer support, the maintenance of the contract with systems consultants, engineering and facilities. We have 3 staff located in headquarters that do all of the engineering and facilities, whether it's contract writing and administration, or it's actually the engineering and facilities management and voting access is under operations. We have opportunities for voting access dollars, so that individual can develop grants, look for matching opportunities, and then work closely with engineering staff and information technology. We have 3 individuals for the entire state that do all of the IT needs, all the networking, all the support. They're integral into the conversations about video conferencing that Commissioner Young brought up before. They've been integral in those conversations in determining what the needs are, what best could meet those needs. So operations is really probably one of the most diverse divisions, and you go from IT to engineering, voting access, customer service. So the individuals that Bob Poyen is operations division administrator, one day he may be talking with counter help, the next day he's talking to engineers, and then he's talking to computer folks. So it's very diverse, kind of a catch-all division for a lot of those things that don't fit neatly under game or fish. Conservation Education Division, 18 positions, primary functions, hunter safety training. So every licensed buyer born after 1960, is it? Which is getting to be about everybody. No offense, Tom. Pick it on you. Hunter and angler education. We do a number of classes, the fly fishing classes. Wildlife education, we work with a lot of the schools. We do the trout in the classroom programs. We have the Oxbow nature area on the Truckee River, run several hundred, if not thousands, I think thousands of kids through there a year, come in by the busload, have a lot of hands-on experience for them there. And then media, public relations, which also includes all of our publications. So the hunt book, the fishing book, all of anything you see as far as a publication is run through Con Ed. They typically develop the content. We have gone outside for some assistance with the hunt book. You recognize those changes of late, but the content is still coming through Con Ed. All the media interactions with TV, radio, the Facebook pages, the web pages, is all a responsibility of the Conservation Education Division.
So Tony, do you have media public at all your main facilities that Truce oversees them?
We have Con Ed staff that handles the media and outreach and has media relations in each of the 3 regions. So in Elko, Joe Doucette works with the NBC affiliate up there and the newspaper and fosters relationships with those outlets. In the South, Doug Nielsen works in that capacity. Nick Dewey works with law enforcement, but also does a lot of that outreach. And then Chris Healy does a lot of that. Is kind of the primary point in the western region. And so we work with those individuals with key stories, key messages, and the relationships that they have.
So in other words, if we have, somebody comes to me, I typically get one of the TV stations want to talk about a cat in a trap or something happening, have a discussion. My first has always been to send it to Doug, and I just wanted to make sure that was, so if they talk to Doug, if Doug doesn't answer your questions, you want to do follow-up beyond Doug, then I'll talk to Doug afterwards, and then I'll follow up as the advisory board chair. But I don't like doing that before you guys talk, that's all.
No, I appreciate that. But yeah, Doug has a really good handle on things down there. And it's, you know, it's one state, but when you look at the demographics and as you go from Vegas to Elko to Reno, there's a unique skill set in each of those areas where Joe is different than Chris, is different than Doug, and they kind of mold and shape to the needs and demands and the issues of their regions. Any other questions? Law Enforcement Division, 52 positions in law enforcement, the bulk of which are game warden positions, 31 game warden field positions. So there's four game warden captains. Those captains are here at headquarters, and then we have the 3 lieutenants, which are the law enforcement regional supervisors in each region, and then 31 field wardens. Wildlife enforcement, boating enforcement, public safety, boating education, and so we have a position under law enforcement. Ed Lingard is the boating education specialist. Ed is the one that also does the Nevada Wild podcast. I don't know if you've heard that. It's getting broader and broader circulation. Ed does a great job with that. Ed also interfaces really well between the Conservation Education Division and messaging and using those media relations to get his messages out. Dispatch services, so this goes back to the 32 communications towers, and we have a full dispatch center over at Valley Road. The dispatch services, I mean, that is critical to warden, to officer safety and communication. They run the licenses, they run the individuals. They also maintain a watch on our aerial activities. We have communications devices in the helicopters that pop up on their screen, and so they know where our helicopters are doing a survey. So we have regular radio checks, and so it's a really key piece to officer and biologist safety. And then the radio technology. So also all the vehicles, and the Federal Communications Commission changes requirements. So we have to have somebody who knows the difference between megahertz and megabytes to figure all that out and make sure all the vehicles are equipped and up to the Federal Communications Commission standards. And so that's a huge piece of law enforcement, and it's a pretty big chunk of that budget. Any questions?
Tony, is there currently resolved, because I remember at times, there were times when the wardens were out in the field and they couldn't communicate on the same frequencies like with the state law enforcement people or local law enforcement people, and they needed help or were trying to respond?
I can give you my version of that, and then maybe Chief Currency can correct it. It really kind of depends on where you are in the state. Each county sheriff's office, they have unique frequencies, and what we have historically done is we've had programmable radios that once we're aware of Forest Service, personnel, BLM, we put those frequencies in, and we have channels on those radios to where we can communicate law enforcement to law enforcement. But I don't believe, for example, all the municipal law enforcement agencies, some of them may not want to reveal those. frequencies for fear that people will monitor them. But I would say for the most part, we have pretty good communication. Anything to add to that, Chief Warden? Or Chief?
No, I think that covers it fairly well. The short answer is we're pretty good on it. With a lot of the agencies going to 800 megahertz, that really doesn't work for us because it's a line of sight thing and it doesn't go around mountains. So that makes some challenges, but for the most part, pretty good with other agencies when we need it.
There's a, just to interject, in Clark County, for example, there is one channel that we call it a common channel. So if we were to have a crisis or an emergency, it's in the supervisor's hands with cars at Metro P, for example. But as Tyler, Tony said, we got some agencies that are trunk systems, some are not. It's a bit difficult. The Department of Emergency Management received a lot of money years ago through DHS to try to get us a system that we could all communicate statewide. But Nevada's got a lot of diverse terrain and a lot of different opinions, and it's a tough thing to do. But as Tyler says, we're okay, but we're not where we need to be by far. A lot of work to do there.
And
The technology is improving quickly to allow that, though I think we're going to be there in the next couple of years. Metro's making some major changes that I think will help a lot for Clark County.
And most folks that are in the field have a pretty good idea of where they can get a cell signal, and so cell phone technology has assisted with our communications quite a bit and provided hopefully a private avenue for person-to-person contact. And like I say, most people in the field, they know where they can go, assuming they're able-bodied, to get that signal. Any other questions on the law enforcement division? Game management division, 33 positions. Wildlife survey and inventory. This is a pretty big chunk of game management. Seasons and harvest quotas, which are pretty much the product of the survey and inventory. Landowner conflict resolution, deer and antelope damage compensation, elk incentive tag, programs administer those as well as fencing, haystacks, etc. Wildlife health monitoring, we have a staff of 2. We have a wildlife veterinarian and a biologist dedicated to wildlife health monitoring. Wildlife health monitoring, although housed in the game management division, is not exclusive to game. Our veterinarian assists with fish issues and pathogens, non-game issues at times, as well as assists with sterilization of desert tortoises. It's been part of the control regime of desert tortoises, the unwanted pet tortoise issue, sterilization of tortoises, and she's been a huge help in that regard as well. And then research and research collaboration. So I spoke earlier about the presentation we had at WACWA on the importance of migratory corridors. The advent of GPS collars has given us a lot of opportunity to learn more about distribution of animals and connectivity of habitat. We don't always have the capacity in-house to do that. When we do, or when we don't, we coordinate with universities or others that have those means. Any questions on structure in the game division?
Well, you mentioned that, the health monitoring, there's some overlap with other, I think across divisions, there's a heck of a lot of overlap.
Yeah, there is, and there's examples of it in every division. And I think that, we talked about the diversity that exists in the operations division, and the services in the operations division, know no bounds. The engineering, the IT, those are statewide functions that all divisions receive some benefit from. Wildlife health monitoring is that way too. Another example we'll see here in a minute is the GIS program in the diversity division. It's housed in the diversity division. My guess is they do far more GIS work for species outside of the diversity division than they do just those species under the management of the diversity division. Fisheries management, 41 full-time employees. Sport fish production, we talked about the 4 hatcheries. Fish production is a key piece of that. And then management, of course, just goes beyond just those sport fish and goes to the all those aquatic species that we saw in the threatened and endangered category. But this also includes the sport fish management, native aquatics, and that's everything from relic dace and leopard frogs to even some spring snails. Aquatic health monitoring, we talked about our wildlife health program. Some of that bleeds into, no pun intended, aquatic health monitoring. And then the aquatic invasive species, AIS program. This is a relatively new program. However, this is another program where there's a lot of coordination with other states, certainly in the Colorado River system, where we share waters and therefore share risks. We get a lot of seasonal help in that program. And that's the program that the legislature created, the AIS stamp and fees, and we also have some federal funds that we can qualify for to help run that program. Any questions on the fisheries management division?
Tony, one question. What's happening with the fishery in Las Vegas?
Lake Mead is really low. Water temperatures are really high. I think that's probably the biggest challenge at this point is we don't have water of an appropriate temperature. What we've done is we've taken advantage of the opportunity to raise some native fishes in there and have developed a pretty impressive program to raise some rare species and use federal funding to do so. So the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is actually paying for that effort. So it allows us to keep people working, keep the hatchery functional, and help ourselves in terms of contributing to conservation of some native fish species. Do you want to speak to that further?
Sure, for the record, John Schober, Chief Fisheries. Specific to Lake Mead Hatchery, as Tony had said, the key issue there is lake levels in Lake Mead and the depth of our our intake, because it's dependent on the BMI system that serves Henderson. At this point, we only have water that would be cold enough to even maintain trout for about 3 months of the year. So it precludes us using that facility for trout production for the time being until we either Lake Mead comes up a bunch or we identify a revenue source that allows us to look into another water source, which would be several millions of dollars to pay for. But as Tony said, we have the advantage of the facility. We've been working with what's called the Lower Colorado River Multi-Species Conservation Program. And that program is providing essentially 100% of the funding to operate the facility to raise mostly razorback sucker and bony-tailed chub, which are both listed species for recovery work on the Lower Colorado River. So that allows us to keep that facility operating at a minimal cost to the department and get some use out of it until we can resolve the larger problem of if and when we can put it back into trout production.
John, is the new straw, the third straw, deep enough now to where that temperature, that water that could be extracted from there, would work for the hatchery?
Yeah,
Is it the transportation of that water to the hatchery?
Absolutely, Commissioner. The issue there is twofold. One is that is plugged into the Southern Nevada Water Authority system, whereas we're hooked up to BMI, and right now the two systems are not connected. There are potentially some strategies down the road that could fix that.
BMI is,
Basic Management Incorporated, and they're the system that supplies the industrial area, the old industrial area of Henderson, and part of the city of Henderson, and also Lake Las Vegas. And right now, that intake is probably 30 feet underwater, and it's not getting any better. The problem with SNWA is twofold, and we've had discussions with them, and with BMI, to the extent that we can engage them, they haven't been very forthcoming.
How much was the cost of that to the water district? I saw they let a gal steal $7 million worth of toner over a few years.
That probably could have paid for
Yes,
it.
the president there knows.
The last discussion we had with them, it was